Dude, yeah, I am no stranger. Everything that you just started sharing, it rings alarm bells because those are all things that I was diagnosed. And like, as soon as they give you a diagnosis, they want you to just be like, oh yeah, this is it. This is the rest of my life. But the truth is, insomnia and narcolepsy, you can overcome them. It just takes a little bit of work. That's a whole message that I try to get behind, because like yourself, like all those diagnoses, like they can seem scary at first. It can seem like they're going to be forever, but with some discipline and the right tools, you can overcome them.
Yeah.
Seth, welcome. Thank you for being here today, man. I can't tell you how excited I am for this. Not because we're gonna trauma bond, but because a lot of the same things that you champion and talk about are things that I dealt with as a child, and as you know, that's something men don't talk about. We don't like to go back, and in my own life story, in my own journey, I didn't deal with this till the very, very end, and then downward spiral, having to go to a treatment center. So Seth, thank you for being here, man, and for being willing to share your story. So, man, take it away. Tell us about your journey, my man.
Yeah, man. So it's been a hell of a ride. I'm 29, I'll be 30 this year, and um I actually I wasn't going to kind of tell my story yet. I was going to wait till my book dropped, but I've got about maybe 6 more months before that's ready. And I started doing jiu-jitsu about a year and a half ago, and my head coach is he just says a lot of things that really resonate with me. And one of the things he's been kind of hammering the last few months is just like, there's never a perfect time for anything. Nothing's ever going to be perfect, so you might as well just start going. Start walking, start taking your steps. And so that's kind of what I was waiting for, this perfect like moment to drop my whole story. And then I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to start. I'm just going to start now. And so that's kind of what happened a few weeks ago. Actually, like 2 or 3 weeks ago now, I posted a video talking about what happened to me as a young man. And it kind of caught some traction. And I've gotten a ton of great feedback since, just with people telling me like, hey, I know somebody who knows somebody. This happened, to me, or I've had people tell me they're going through it right now with the judicial system and getting their own justice. So to stop beating around the bush, basically, I grew up with a single mother of 3. My father was never really in my life. I think the first time I ever really met him was when he was in jail. Um, I have pictures from when I was like a baby, like 2, 3 years old, of being around him, but he went to prison pretty early. The story is that he stabbed my mom behind the ear during a fight while me and my 2 sisters were in the other room. And he said it's her fault. She said it's his fault. That's as much as I know of that. And so he went to prison for that. And so I never knew him growing up. I never had a father, and I don't think it really ever dawned on me for a long time until I went to go meet him. And I do remember meeting him in jail. I remember walking in to seeing the cubicles. And, I knew him. As soon as I saw him, I knew who he was. I knew that was my dad when I saw him across the thing. And I'm a very emotional guy. So I broke down and I started crying immediately. I couldn't even talk to him. I don't remember saying much to him because I couldn't stop crying. So that was like my first encounter that I can remember with my father. So, whatever, went home, and my mom, she did a good job raising us as best as she could, from what I remember, for a long time. I think I was probably about 8 or 9 when things kind of started to change, and my sisters were the same age as me. So my younger sister was 7, my older sister was 9. So we're 1 year apart, 7, 8, 9. So
Yeah.
yeah. So when I was about 9 years old, though, that's so it's about 8 or 9. That's when things kind of started to change. That 20 years ago, that's back when weed was like really bad, and if you were smoking weed, you were like a criminal. And so
Yeah.
I remember going up the stairs one day after school, and I kind of like look off to my right, and I can see, my mom's in the living room, and there's a bunch of guys in there, a whole bunch of her friends, and both my sisters are in there, and I don't know if my little sister was smoking at this time, but my older sister definitely was, and so she was probably 10, no older than 10 or 11, and she was sitting in a room with adults, smoking weed. At this point, we had been exposed to it so much that it was just normal for them to pass the blunt to this 11-year-old girl, right? And I remember
Yeah.
I remember going up the stairs that day, and I was like, you know what, man, like this will never be my life. Like I will never I will do better things than this. And I thought I'd be an Ohio State running back and all these other things that never happened. But um, yeah, I just knew that I would do better things with my life. And then probably within 6 months of that situation, I would end up meeting this guy who I met through a friend, a very close friend of mine, and he was probably about 30 years old at the time. Guy's like 6'5", 6'6", 380 pounds, this massive guy. And I was over at my friend's house, and it was like a Friday afternoon, and we were off school, and I remember coming down the stairs and I saw this guy at the front door, and I'm like, dang, like who's this guy? And he approached me and started talking to me about playing video games and things like that. And I was like, yeah, I play video games. I play, Madden and the NCAA and all this. And he's like, oh, you like football? Yeah. Buckeyes? Yep. Love the Buckeyes. I'm from Ohio. And so, um, we kind of bonded pretty quick. And the guy was like nice, very friendly. I just, it's like, yeah, cool, man. And he offered to take me up to his house with my friend, my friend had already known him for probably a year or two at this point, if not longer. And we go up to his house, and his I actually just went up there again last weekend or 2 weekends ago to go look at it again. I haven't seen it in 15 years, but I went up there and I go to his house, and it's like this big studio apartment, right? So it's just one big room. There's no walls. It's just one big room. It's like a low ceiling, acoustical ceiling tiles, and it's a real dark room. Everything in there's like black, and just it looks like a dungeon. It looks like a cave, like a dungeon. The back left corner had this black sheet that kind of cornered off his room, and the right side had like 3 or 4 TVs, game systems, all the new game systems, which was like the Xbox 360 and Xbox One at the time. He had 2 or 3 computers in there, like desktops, video games, things like that. It was like, man, you walked in, it was just video games. Like everybody could play at the same time. It was awesome. And so that's what we did. We went up there, we played video games, we ate all the pizza, we drank all the pop, we drank the coffee, energy drinks. And when you're 10 years old, man, it's like, dude, like I can come up here, I can cuss, I can eat pizza and drink pop all night. Like this is awesome. So
Yeah.
that's what we
It's a
did.
fucking wonderland. Yeah.
Dude, it really is, man. And you know, it's crazy, man. It was crazy. So this guy's name is Armando Vasquez, and he's dead in prison now. This is all public record, so it's not anything that's going to get anybody in trouble. But he 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 keeps inviting us up, and he invites me up every weekend, and I want to go as much as I can because I'm like, dude, this is awesome. Like because at the same time. At home, I was dealing with my mom, who was starting to get more into drugs. She was starting to get more physically abusive. So it's very hard for me to tell the story and the like use the gravity that is in the situation, because Monday through Friday I was dealing with my mom, who was getting more
Yeah.
abusive, more drugs were coming in the house, different people, just strangers, things like that. And then Friday and Saturday I was hanging out with this guy. Well, one Sunday before he brings me back home, he I was at some point it became normal for me to sit on his lap. I don't even think I was 11 years old yet, and it became normal for me to sit on his lap. And that was the first time he had ever like touched me per se. My friend had left to go get some tacos. My friend was a few years older than me, so he was already driving. He drove down the street to go get some tacos, and I was sitting on the guy's lap, and his hand, slips off my hip and kind of touches my butt. And I was like, oh, he's like, oh, I'm sorry. I was like, hey, yeah, no worries. It'd be like if I bumped you in the hallway, I'm like, oh, my bad, bro. And that's kind of like, that's how I treated it. I was like, yeah, no worries. So after that, he kind of puts his hand on my butt, and he's like, oh, so this is okay. And I said, yeah, man. I'm like, whatever. And I knew it was wrong. A lot of people ask me like, "Did you know?" And yeah, I knew it was wrong immediately. I knew something was wrong, and unfortunately, when that happened, I just froze up, like a lot of people do. And so I froze up,
Yep.
and I kind of just accepted it for what it was, and I still remember everything about the guy. I remember what he smelled like. I remember what his hands feel like. He had these big, dry hands, dry knuckles, uh, fingernails. I know what his rough hands feel like touching me, touching my, going into my shorts. Over the next few months, he was, every weekend it was just, you know, it was like dating a girl, I guess. And every time you take her on a date, third date, fourth date, fifth date, you start touching different bases, and that's kind of how it was. And yeah, after a while, it was totally normal for me to sit on his lap, and he would just slide his hand in my shorts and just kind of touch me and feel me. And I was just kind of going through it, man. And I talk about that paralyzing feeling. That's kind of what it was like. And you know, um, when I first started going up to his house too, I noticed that my other friend would sleep in his bed with him back in the corner, and you couldn't see the bed. It was blocked off with like these black sheets. But it never dawned on me. I was just like, it's just like a buddy. It's just like you and your buddies when you're 10 years old. You might sleep in the same bed, or it might be three or four of you sleeping in a room. So you might share a bed with a buddy. That's kind of what I thought about. Um, but at this point, when he started touching me, I realized like, okay, this is something else. Because I started to sleep
Yeah.
in the bed with him, and still at this point, I had no idea that it was happening to anybody else. I really didn't even like think that it could have happened to my friend because he was older than me. He was bigger, stronger, and he was like my hero. So like I
Yeah.
didn't have a father, but I imagine if you had a father in your life, your father's your hero, and like there's nobody that can hurt him, or he's just the toughest man ever because it's your father, and or like a bigger brother. And that's kind of what I looked at this guy like. I was like, yeah, this wouldn't have happened to him. He wouldn't let somebody touch him. So yeah, I started to sleep in the bed with him, and things just got progressively worse. It went from touching to, um, to where he was trying to put his fingers in me and things like that. Um, and then it starts to get pretty graphic where he starts to perform like oral sex on me. And during this time, I was going through puberty, right? I was like 11, 12 years old, start going through puberty. And so he'd make these comments of like, oh, you're growing, or like your hair, he just like, it's like, man, like this is just disgusting. Thinking about it now, I didn't realize it at the time, but thinking about it now, it's like, man, this guy is just like disgusting. And so he would
Yeah.
make these comments, about me growing and like body hair and things like that. And then when your body's aroused, there's nothing you can do about that. And that was a really hard thing to kind of understand. Um, but when somebody touches you, I mean, it's just that's your body's natural reaction is to be
Exactly.
aroused, and
Yeah.
you know. So
And I want to pause right there
yeah,
because a lot of people don't understand um, these pedophiles are expert at grooming and manipulating kids. It is an absolute fucking nightmare. And at first, when it's brought in, like, my situation, people ask, like, how can you have lived that for so long? And they don't understand that it is a constant manipulation, a constant grooming to normalize these things. You in your own body know that this is wrong. And when it's an adult male who's bigger than you, stronger than you, there's no fight, there's no flee. The only thing you got is freeze. The only thing you have. Um, and as a child, nothing's more fucking frightful. Like, and knowing that your friend is there, they're going through the same thing. They're dealing with the same thing. And nobody understands unless they've lived it, unless they've experienced it, how quickly it comes on, how quickly it happens, how they make themselves the center of your world. And there's a special place in hell for these
Yeah.
individuals. It's understanding that your body is trying to protect you in that moment of disassociation and freeze. And that's all you have. That is all you have. And I can only imagine there's no going home and telling your mom. There's no explaining to anybody else. It is just one of the most helpless things that you can experience as a human being.
Dude, yeah, I mean, you hit it right there on the head, man. Like, especially with the, I actually talk about it in my book. I say there's a line in my book where I say these guys are extremely intelligent, they're calculated, strategic, and you have to be if you have a fetish for fucking kids. Like, if that's your thing, you've got to be really good at it. Because if you're not, you're going to get caught. And as bad as that sounds, it's like if you're going to rob banks. Look, I mean, if you're going to rob banks, you got to be good. If you're going to be a criminal, you got to be, and you want to be, you don't want to get caught. You've got to be very smart about it. And you know, to do what he did, he was good at what he did for sure. And obviously, that kind of roped me into the situation. And so yeah, man, like I was saying, he would start to do his thing, and I at probably 12 years old, 13 years old, I had experienced my first orgasm, right, with this man. And, he looked up at me and he's like, did you enjoy that? Right. And because I had an orgasm, he's like, he's proud of himself, which is
Yeah.
just ridiculous, man. And looking back on it, when that happened, I was heartbroken and I was like disturbed because my friends from school weren't doing this. Like they were eating pizza rolls and playing games at their own house, like whatever they're doing, right? And I was laying in this guy's bed, just going through hell. And at the same time that was going on, once again, I was going home, and at this point, my mom, there was like crack and cocaine in the house, like coming through the
Fuck.
house, and we had this bathroom in the back of the house, and I mean, literally every single day, man, people would come in the house. I probably 20, 30 people I've never seen before would come in. They'd go into the back of the house. They'd sit in the bathroom for like 8 hours a day, like it was their job. And the house smelled. It was like it had this like really musty smell. But I would see people come out at 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night, sitting on the couch, completely high out of their mind, um, like eyes rolled back, sitting on the couch, just like shaking, almost like seizing slightly, just because they were so high. And so I was dealing with that Monday through Friday, and then this house I lived in at the time actually had a whole. So my bedroom upstairs had a hardwood floor, and the people who lived there before must have had dogs trapped in that room or something because it smelled like just dog shit and
Yeah.
piss. And I slept on this mattress that was like 4 inches thick, had a thin little blanket, and I pissed the bed every single night. Um, and then there was a hole in my ceiling in my bedroom, and it was about 4 feet deep and about 2 3 feet wide. I mean, it was like the entire corner of my ceiling. I could see the roof structure above, like I could see straight into the attic, straight into the roof decking. And we had it covered with plastic, and but this is in Ohio in the dead of winter, and it's like freaking cold air is coming in my room. I mean, dude, at that point I was like in a deep, deep hole, man. Every night I was calling this guy Monday through Friday. I would call him at night and I would talk to him because as twisted as he was, he, because I was getting bullied and I was fighting in school a lot, and I was dealing with a lot of things with my mom, obviously getting my ass beat by her and just pissing the bed every night. It was just a bad, bad time. We didn't have a lot of food, and so I would talk to this guy at night, and he would actually like coach me through life. And it's really jacked up, man, because he was the worst
Well,
thing that
he
ever
made
happened.
himself, yeah, he made himself the center of your universe. He had everything, access to all the fun stuff, and all you had to do was just be a victim for a little bit,
That's right.
suffer and endure just for a little bit of comfort. And the wedding to bed, that is something that is indicative of somebody that your body has lost all fucking hope.
Yeah.
You've lost all hope there's subconsciously you are and hey, I experienced the same fucking thing. There is it's the same thing, the same trauma, the same indicators of our veterans in combat during World War II that was just pissed themselves because there's just, you're shutting down.
Yeah.
Just there's no controlling it. You're
Right.
just absolutely no hope in living. Every day is a nightmare. But the one person, I remember the same thing with my predator, same fucking thing. No matter how bad it got, if that person offered you kindness by the grace of God, if they offered you some sort of reward for doing something good, holy shit, you lit
Yeah,
up
man.
as a kid.
Yeah.
You lit up.
Yeah. Dude. God, dude, it was so fucked up, man. And, looking back on it now, it's just like every time I talk about it, it's just like, holy shit, man. And, so when I was 12, that's when I left my mom. And this was a pretty crazy day. I'll tell it as quickly as I can. But there was a show called Intervention. I think it just started re-airing, but it used to be really popular back in the day.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they would
Yeah.
do, so at the end of every episode, they would put their contact information out there and they'd say, hey, if you know somebody who needs help, contact us. So we were at my neighbor's house and we're watching the show. And me and my sisters were like, hey, like, let's get mom on the show. Because I had just addressed her at 12 years old. I sat down with my mom and I asked her, I said, Mom, are you using drugs? Like, I knew it was happening, but I wanted her to admit it to me, and she couldn't. She wouldn't. She couldn't. She did like what most people do. She freaked out, yelled, and screamed at me. So a few weeks later, this happened, and we go to walk outside to go over, and we're like, you know what? Our neighbor was gonna help us contact this place, and we walk outside, and there's a fire in the front yard, and I think I remember this is really hard to remember these things. You black them all out, but
Yeah.
I think her boyfriend came out and he had like blood on his shirt, like he'd been stabbed or something like that. And so the cops pull up almost immediately. And this is like something you'd see in a movie. And they go in, they grab my mom, and they put her in the back of the cop car, like immediately. And I'm 12 years old, and I walk up to the police car, and I'm like, this is my mom, and we don't have anywhere to go. Like, if she leaves, like, what are we going to do? And the next thing I remember is the cop comes in, and I'm looking at my mom, and she's like, I'll get you back or I'll be back, and we're kind of talking through the glass, and boom, she's gone. And I'm sitting here like, what the hell am I going to do? So I'm just hysterical, crying my eyes out. I've just seen my mom get taken away from me. And despite all the bullshit that had happened, that's my mom, man. And
Yeah.
that's just a connection that you just can't get rid of. And so, um, they take her away, and the next 4 months of my life was pretty crazy, just kind of bouncing around at 12 years old, like living with random people in different places and surviving. And all this time, nobody had any idea that anything was happening to me. I mean, I would show up to school with a smile. I was a class clown. I was a straight A student, and I was just this perfect kid. I would get in fights a lot,
Yeah.
but other than that, I was a perfect student, and I was a happy kid. And so about 4 months later, my grandparents take me in, and they finally get the chance to adopt me. And my sisters were already there, and my sisters would end up going back to my mom's house. They didn't want to stay with my grandparents, and I stayed with my grandparents because I was like, well, they've got money. I've got a warm house, food on the table every
Yeah.
day, and I'm not embarrassed to be around them, So I was like, yes, I'm staying.
Yeah.
Like, you guys can adopt me. So they adopted me when I was 13, but when I got there, I said, hey, I want to go hang out with my friend on the weekend. And so,
Oh.
yeah, so he comes back into my life, right? He never really left. So my grandma's like, no, like, who's this? No, you're not hanging out with this old man. Like, it's not happening. And so I was molested as well when I was about 5 or 6, and it happened like once or twice by one person who was babysitting us. And we told my grandparents about that, and that was so long ago and such a mild occasion that it's hard for me to remember those details, but I do remember briefly. And so my grandma knew, like, I had already been molested once, like, so you're automatically like just
Wary.
vulnerable
Yeah.
to the situation. And so she's like, nope, not hanging out with this guy. Well, I said, he's not like that. He's my best friend, blah, blah, blah. I defended him as best I could. And so she goes, okay, well, let's meet him first. And so the freaking guy shows up, and it's like a first date, It's like he gets out the car, he walks up to the house, and it's like, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, to my grandma and grandpa, and he's making them laugh, and boom, now I'm back in the guy's bed. And, looking back on it, man, it's like, 12 years old, 13 years old, 14 years old, 15 years old, 16 years old, 17 years old, 18 years old, 19 years old, 20 years old, 21 years old, 22 years old, 23 years old, 24 years old, 25 years old, 26 years old, 27 years old, 28 years old, 29 years old, 30 years old, 31 years old, 32 years old, 33 years old, 34 years old, 35 years old, 36 years old, 37 years old, 38 years old, 39 years old, 40 years old, 41 years old, 42 years old, 43 years old, 44 years old, 45 years old, 46 years old, 47 years old, 48 years old, 49 years old, 50 years old, 51 years old, 52 years old, 53 years old, 54 years old, 55 years old, 56 man, if they would have just stuck to, and I don't blame them for it, because the guy's good. But if they'd have just stuck to their guns, if somebody would have sat down and been like, "No, I don't care how nice this guy is, you're not
Yeah.
going to his damn house," and
They're
nobody
they're
really,
expert manipulators.
they are, man. It
Expert
is,
manipulators. Every time somebody meets them, especially if there's somebody that have been grooming that child for a long time, he had his hooks in you.
yep,
There's no way he was going to lose you, no matter what. And I can only imagine how he sold himself to your grandparents. Hey, I'm a positive influence. I'm going
yep,
to mentor him. I'm going to do great things. And it's parallels to my own life. When people saw that guy with his cowboy hat and his big fucking belt buckle and carried himself like he was just such a upright standing citizen of the community, nobody questioned it. Nobody questioned the nightmares that were going on at home. They're like, oh, this is a red-blooded American. Meanwhile, he's having these disgusting, predatory relationships going on in his own home.
yeah,
And it's the same thing for you. Everybody within, I guarantee everybody that knew that guy said the same thing probably. Oh, he's such a great dude. Look at him always taking care of kids. But that's how they fucking do it. And right now in this country, there are so many individuals championing and spitting this fucking rhetoric of, oh, these are just individuals. It's a new gender ideology. Fuck no.
yeah,
The time to have these conversations and be able to share these stories is right the fuck now, Seth. This is the time that it fucking matters the most, because we are seeing people championing for the normalization of these disgusting fucking individuals.
yeah.
And it's and I can only imagine how devastated your grandparents were when the truth finally came out.
Yeah, dude. So I'll get to that in just a second. So man, this shit is fucking crazy. This is some shit you see in a fucking movie. So boom, I'm back in the guy's house, right? And my 13th birthday, he showed up. They did a surprise birthday party for me, right? So he shows up at my grandparents' house, surprise birthday party, and I think even my dad was there when that happened. But my family was all there. Everybody's happy for me. This guy's there. But I would even from the time I had first met this guy, I would go to his family outings. So like any family
Oh,
holidays,
fuck.
Christmas, Thanksgiving, freaking whatever family events you got, 4th of July, I would go and see his family. And this guy had a mom and like 3 sisters, and all of his sisters were married with children. And so he'd show up to Christmas with this fucking 12-year-old kid, and they're just like, okay, Mondo's got a friend who's 12, not weird. And so like I knew his whole fucking family, man. I mean, it is insane, dude. And so I mean, there's not enough time today just to get into the details of like how jacked up this shit was. But we
Hey, we're on this motherfucker. We're going, bro. These stories need to be shared because majority of Americans think that a predator is somebody that hides behind a computer and he's
right.
he's this gross dude. No, fuck no. It can be anybody, and that's the sick fucking truth. It can be the dude that you just works at the fucking in your office building.
Yep.
Like you have to be able to see these warning signs, man. Like
Yeah, man.
there is, and it's frustrating, man. It's frustrating because I look back and there were so many fucking warning signs. Not a single fucking teacher, not
Yeah.
a single fucking adult ever stepped in.
Yeah.
And there we are, living that life every single day.
Yeah.
And when you think somebody's going to come and rescue, when you think someone's going to come in there and kick in that door, no. I had one fucking principal thought maybe he was going to do something after I showed up to school with a fucking really bad fucking both black eyes, just looking fucking miserable. Didn't fucking do anything.
Yeah.
You can't see the abuse that's going on.
Yeah.
And they're not willing, with the signs they can't see, they're not willing to step in. A lot aren't. And if you're listening to this right now, and you suspect, you just have one little bit of inkling, fucking ask the questions. Get fucking involved. It's better to have that moment of like, hey, you know what? Hey, honest, hey, look, I made a mistake. I was thinking something was going on. Get fucking involved. Right now, more than ever, like people, adults, everybody needs to be a fucking censor. We say in the military,
Yeah,
be a
exactly.
censor. If you see something, if it looks wrong, if it smells wrong, fucking say something.
Yeah.
Because looking back, man, like, and that exact fucking scenario of him taking you to a family outing with his family, 12-year-old fucking kid doesn't belong.
Yep.
Even if it's a fucking good mentor, fuck that. You got your own family. Fuck.
Dude. So yeah, man, it was fucked up, man. So he shows up at my 13th birthday party, and by the time I was 13 or 14, I had every sexual engagement, encounter, whatever you can do with somebody, right? Anything you can do in the bed with somebody sexually, I had to experience with this man by the time I was 13. I'll never forget the first time, I guess, I don't know what the right word for it is, but I'll just call it rape. The first time he raped me. And, my little freaking tiny body, and I can see it, like I can see it. And even when it happened to me, I could see it. I was having an out of body experience. Like I felt like I was the only person in the world. I was in his bed. He had black sheets, black blankets. It was dark. And, I remember going back to his bed for all these years, and there was this jar of Vaseline there, and he always talked about it. And he would make jokes in front of his some other friends that we would hang out with. He'd make these jokes about like, oh, I'm going to go fuck Seth tonight. Ha ha ha. And everybody would just kind of laugh it off. Like these other adults that we would hang out with, they would just laugh it off. But yeah, man, the first night, I remember the first time he freaking raped me, man, and I'm like on his bed, and he puts his hand on my hips, and I can feel his hands holding me there, and he did what he needed to do, and he takes a towel and he freaking wipes me up like a gentleman. And at 13 years old, man, I go and I sit on his toilet to get the rest of the shit out of my body, and I'm sitting there at that point. I'm just like, dude, like, what the fuck is going on with my life? And I was fucking miserable. Um, I was just like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, what the fuck is going on? Like, why is this happening to me? And I knew I couldn't. Well, I say I knew, but I couldn't say anything because, like, what are you going to say now? Like, well, now Seth's gay. What if he has HIV? What if he has AIDS? What if my friends at school find out about me? All these different things, man. And you just get trapped in this fear of rejection, right? So this continues to happen for another couple of years. Everything just continued to happen. The reciprocation of the oral sex with me and him, and then him and me, and he'd make these comments, and just, man, it's really, really bad. And I actually, so when I was almost 16, I was about a month away from being 16. And I had a younger friend that was with me at his house. And my younger friend goes back in this guy's bed. And this was the first time that I can remember ever seeing my friend go back there. And so I was like, okay, like something's up. And he had been making the same kind of grooming comments towards him that he'd made towards me for years. And so I knew it was coming. But when he took him back there in the bed with him, I said, all right, this is it. Like, I'm like, fuck this. And truthfully, my thought process at the time, I was like, the audacity to do what you did to me and then do it to somebody else right in front of me, like I don't see it happening. It's almost like cheating on your wife and then texting the girl that you just cheated on her with right in front of her, like, look at me, And so I was kind of like, I didn't feel like I was being cheated on. I wasn't jealous, but I was just like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, that you think you can just do this and get away with it again? And so kind of a crazy story again. I was sitting here playing a video game. It was World of Warcraft at the time. We were really big into that, and I was playing with my friend who introduced me to the guy like 5 years ago. And I messaged him and I said, "Hey man, I need to see you tomorrow after Armando drops me off." And he says, "Okay, got it." And to him, I've talked to him about this afterwards, and he knew what it was about immediately. As soon as I sent him the message, he knew. And mind you, at this point, I was convinced that I was the only person that this had ever happened to. I never suspected it from anybody, that it had happened to even to my friend who introduced me to the guy. I just assumed that I was the only one. but I knew it was about to happen to my friend if I didn't say something. So I said, hey, I
Yeah.
got to see you, right? So just as I say that, in the chat box, Mondo comes out of the room and he like walks over to the computer real quick. And I'm just like, what the fuck? I'm like, so I try to scroll up in the chat real quick so he can't see it. And I'm confident that he did see it because the whole mood changed that night. And the guy's smart. And so I say this a lot, but like I thought I was going to get murdered that night. I sat there and I'm like, the whole mood changed. He just got quiet and it just was like you could just feel it in the air. And so the whole night I'm like kind of like watching the door because he was 6'5", like I said, 380 pounds, but he was built like he was very capable. He did not look like a sloppy person. Like he looked like he could throw a hard punch. So
Yeah.
I knew that if he made a quick move or something, I was going to have to run away and escape somehow, try to get out of his apartment. So that whole night I spent thinking I was going to get murdered. I was convinced that he saw the message, and I knew that if he saw the message, he knew something was up. Like he's smart about this, and so whatever. I make it home the next day. He drops me off first, and he takes my friend home. And when he drops me off, my other friend shows up, and I go in my room and I'm talking to him about it, and I can't get the words to come out of my body. Basically, I'm just like, look, man, I've been wanting to say this for a long time, and I can't. I don't know how to say this, and I don't want you to be upset with me, and I can't get the words to come out. And so he goes, Mondo touched you, didn't he? And I kind of like just fall apart. I just start crying and I fall to the floor, can't move my body. I'm like getting cold right now thinking about it.
Yeah.
But I fall to the floor and I just can't move. I'm just like crying harder than I've ever cried before in my life. And the next thing that happens after about 10 seconds or so is he says, well, he did it to me too. And I turn and I look at him and I'm just like, I was expecting like the rejection, and I'm like,
Yeah.
what the fuck? And so he goes, what do you want to do about it, man? He's like, I'll follow your lead, man, whatever you want to do. And I really appreciate now that he had said that because it just showed how much he supported me instead of
Yeah.
forcing me, into a place. Because if you're listening to this, reporting is not always the best right away for that person. And this is like a very hard thing to explain to people, but a lot of times when you say, well, if somebody raped my daughter or my son or my wife or my child, then I would go and murder that person. And when you say that, it makes it very hard to report because if I'm at 15 years old and I report this guy and then my grandpa goes and murders him, well, now my grandpa with the same name as me goes and murders said pedophile and then goes to prison, right? Well, now it's like, well, why did Seth's grandpa go to prison? Oh, it's in the news. Oh, he murdered the guy that's been raping his grandson. So now at 15 years old, not only did I just come out about the guy, but now the entire world knows about this like tragic story. And so
Yeah.
then I surely kill myself because I can't deal with it, right? So that's why
No,
I'm so
that's something that nobody talks about. Nobody talks about the implications socially, especially as a young boy and as men. I didn't talk about any of my sexual abuse or any of the trauma I endured as a kid purely because I'll be damned if someone's going to use that against me, make a mockery of my trauma, make a mockery of what I went through. It wasn't until I went into a treatment center and talked about that. It wasn't until I was actually somewhere where I felt like, okay, like I can be vulnerable in this situation and speak about the atrocities that I experienced as a kid. No one's going to talk about rape openly. And if they found out when you were a kid, like,
dude, you're fucked.
No,
kids are fucking
you're
ruthless.
absolutely fucked. Kids are ruthless. Who's going to be, and you don't have a protector.
Yep.
You don't have somebody that's there for you to help navigate the way through this. Like surviving this type of trauma, surviving this, it puts an emotional toll that you carry for the rest of your life until, if you're lucky enough, if you're blessed enough, you get help. You're able to talk with somebody that can explain to you why you're not a failure, you're not weak, that there is such a thing as fight, flight, and freeze. That you were a fucking child. You were a fucking child. It's not your fucking fault. And no one's there to say that shit to you until you get help.
Right. And before I continue, if anybody is, or whoever is listening to this, and if you are a victim or somebody, I don't mean to say this in a scary way, but you've got to find somebody that you can confide in. You just need to find somebody who's level-headed and just talk to them. Even if you want to say, look, I don't want to report this, I just need to say this out loud. There are ways to do that. It's kind of like in the military. There's like the with the sharp reports. There's like there's like a public report, and then there's like a private or something like that. So confidential or whatever. So I would just say, if there is something going on, it doesn't matter what it is in your life. It doesn't matter what it is. You have to find somebody that you can talk to that can just listen and not respond. And if you are a person who does hear this from somebody, just listen and let them get out what they need to say, and let them kind of make the decisions of like, what do you want to do? Like, can I help you, or do you need to find a resource? Like, what's the plan from here? Did you just need to talk? That may be it. And if that is it, then you have to let that person who's going through it kind of handle that situation. So I say all that because my friend, he basically left it up to me. Even though it happened to him too, he was just like, what do you want to do? You want to report him, or do you want to keep it a secret? And I said, fuck this guy. Like, we got to fucking get his ass. And so what's crazy about this too is I was molested that weekend. He had touched me that weekend. So I knew I had his DNA on me. And so when I got home that Sunday and the Saturday night that I spent at his house, I knew I couldn't take a shower. Like, I knew I needed to have his DNA on my body. And so Sunday comes around, and I'm walking around with his DNA all day. So we go out, we tell my grandparents, and my grandma was just absolutely like floored, right? Because they tried to stop this 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago. And they tried to stop it 10 years ago when I was like 5 or 6 when it first happened to me. So my grandma was just like destroyed. And unfortunately, she passed away a few years ago. That's about, I wish she could just be here to see what I'm doing now. That's really, the extent of like, I don't know if regret's the right word, but I just wish that she could be here to see what I was doing now. But yeah, man, she was tore up, and she stays at the house, and then we go to the hospital. Kind of a long story, but I meet this officer who kind of coincidentally enough was married to one of my teachers from a few years prior. So this lady who was my teacher, she was my teacher while I was being sexually abused, right? Every single weekend of my life. And then I would end up meeting her husband, 4 years later, and he would be the one who would handle my case. And so I just interviewed this guy too, and that interview was up on YouTube. I just interviewed him 13 years after the fact, and just to get his side of the story, because I never heard from him before, And so I sat down with him and I did his interview, and it's really cool to hear his side of how everything played out. But he went up and arrested the guy, and he was able to get him to admit to everything. And he wasn't under custody, so he wasn't under arrest. So for those who don't understand that, that's really, really cool, because the guy could have gotten up and walked out at any time. He could have gotten up and walked away.
Yeah.
And he was not under arrest. And they told him that, like, hey, you're not under arrest. If you want to leave, you can leave. We just want to talk to you about something that Seth said. And the guy apparently like denies it at first and says, I'm not gay and I'm not any of this, and that's a lie. And then he finally admits to convincing me to give him oral sex. And a few other things kind of play out, and they end up arresting him. And he pleads, then a month later or so, he pleads guilty. And the guy, this was back in 2011, so he gets 10 years in prison for pleading guilty. And what's crazy about this too is he had, at a minimum, 6 years of pleasure with, at a minimum, 2 young boys. Probably closer to 8 to 10 years of pleasure with the other victims. I only know of one other victim, and this just gets even worse and worse. He lived in a small town called Bluffton, Ohio. Bluffton, Ohio has 4,000 people in it. His mom lived on Main Street, and his mom had a wraparound porch on 2 sides of the house, big Victorian-style house. And every year on Halloween, he would have a haunted house at his mom's house around the front porch. And so every little kid in that little town would come through his haunted house, and he'd be at the end handing every little kid candy. And that was like, I mean, it's just like, dude, this is like some shit you see in a movie, man. Like, the guy who's running the famous haunted house is freaking raping little boys, And me and one of the kids, the only victims that we know of. And so he gets 10 years in prison. and he'd be out today. You know, he requested parole in 2019. He was denied, and he would be out free today. He was denied parole in 2019, and then he died shortly after that in jail. I'm trying to get more details on all that. I don't know if they'll let me know, but I got a call when I was in Afghanistan when I was in the 82nd still, and I just got a call, and there, my wife let me know, like, hey, so and so died, and at this point I was just kind of like, yeah, whatever, like I don't give a fuck, like good for him.
Yeah.
But yeah, he died in prison, so thankfully he didn't get out and get to walk this world and be a free man, and all I can hope is that he had a bad time in prison. But nowadays there's so many freaking pedophiles, they get their own damn wing. So
yeah, it's a hard thing to understand, like trusting in God's plan. It is hard. It is absolutely one of the hardest things that I had to understand and come to terms with. Like, hey, like there's no justice on earth that I could ever impart on this individual that would be as complete and as perfect as God's justice. And in the end, it's true. My predator's dead, and he died and lived a horrible fucking existence. And I didn't know it. I spent a lot of time and a lot of energy hoping and praying just the most horrible things would happen. And it got me nowhere closer to feeling free of it. Right. It wasn't until I got help and went through this healing journey where I realized, like, fuck this, like whatever he's going through, whatever, like, why am I going to give over more energy and more of my mind hoping and praying that something happened? No, fuck that. God's got something for him. Yep. And man, I'm telling you, the justice that God imparted on that individual was perfectly executed. What he went through his last remaining years in life after the nightmare that he put us through was perfect. And then I understood, like, that fine when it sucks when they say forgive, because the last thing I want to do, or any survivor wants to do, is fucking forgive.
That's right.
But forgiveness doesn't do anything for that person. I don't have to. Forgiveness is freeing me from it. It's freeing me from having to relive that and holding on to that and letting it go finally.
Right.
It's not, you're not absolving the person.
Right.
You're just freeing yourself from the hatred, from that constant feeling that you have to control what happens. Like, no, man, what all of us go through, every child, every individual that suffers this pain, that final thing that we all have to do is just forgive and let go of it and let it go. God's got it. It's not in our hands. Like,
yeah, man.
And it's so fucking hard, dude. It's so fucking hard. But like, going back to my faith and understanding that part and seeing the reality of it, it's like, okay, I can let go of this. Like, I don't have to hold on to it.
Yeah, dude.
Like,
I was gonna say, when it happened, I had already been through so much shit in my life that I was just kind of like, and this was 10 years, or well, this was like 13, 14 years ago now, but I didn't like see crime victim services. I didn't like get any treatment, no therapy, nothing. They were just kind of like, yeah, thanks. And then nobody followed up with me. So I just kind of left, went home, and then I didn't have any plans that weekend. Like, I was like, okay, well, now what the fuck am I going to do? And that was like the extent of, I mean, I woke up the next day and I was just kind of like, okay, like it really didn't hit me until I was about to get out of the Army, actually, oddly enough. And that's kind of when I started, like, man, I was going through some shit. Well, I tell you what, I was getting out. I was, that's a stressful time. And we just got back from Afghanistan, and I was married, had 2 kids, and I didn't know what the fuck I was going to do. I knew I was going to be successful. Like, I'm like a hard freaking driven person. I knew I was going to do something right, but you just start freaking out, man. And then, your whole command's like wanting you to re-enlist, and they're telling you that you're going to fail and that you're not going to make money and all this shit. And you're just like, man, what the fuck? So, and actually what really triggered everything for me is I watched the R. Kelly documentary. And the R. Kelly documentary, he's got a fucked up story too, where...
Dude, I couldn't get through that documentary, man.
Yeah.
Dude, and the thing that scared me as a young man was when you start hearing statistics or start hearing people talk, and you take a sociology class or you took a psychology class, and you see these stats that, oh, predators, you're more likely to be a predator if you're a victim. I'm like, fuck, dude. I was like, this is my pathway.
Yep.
It was such a shocking thing for me to be like, no, fuck that. No, I'm not a statistic. I am not going to be this monster. I'm not going to be somebody that preys on people. Fuck that shit.
Right.
And you hear all these statistics, all these numbers running through you, and then you see something like the R. Kelly, where it's like you look in your life and you realize, like, oh my God, like I'm nothing like the predator. That I'm nothing like my abuser. I'm kind. Like I might not have everything figured out, but I take care. I'm a defender. I fucking enlisted.
Right.
I serve. I am of service to other people. Like
Right.
I am an anomaly. And then you see R. Kelly was a victim. He himself suffered.
Yep.
But he became a predator, and it's like, holy shit. Like,
dude, so I'm not defending the guy, right? But what happened to him is tragic, man, because if I remember correctly, he was having sex with grown women when he was like 12, 13, 14 years old, something like that. And so when the time came for him to be of age and he was still having sex with these younger women who were 17, 18, whatever they were, 16, he was doing what was normal to him. And unfortunately, he didn't have the guidance to kind of get him out of that place. And it sucks, man, because that could have very easily been me. I was just on another show last week, and I was telling him I was very sexually motivated, man. When I was freaking 15, 16 years old and I finally reported that guy, every girl that I encountered after that, I was very, very motivated by sex. Like I was just like, yeah, we gotta have sex. We gotta have sex. Like we hang out, we gotta have sex. And so I was very handsy and touchy, and um, I mean, I could have very, very, very well been a statistic of boy rapes girl kind of situation. And
yeah,
that's one thing that I kind of want to get into schools and colleges to speak to the boys and speak to the men to let them know that, look, man, this shit is not okay, right? If you are hanging out with a girl and she does not want to do anything, like just fucking back off, because I think that a lot of times kids get in those situations and, it's just like the girl, just like a guy or like me as a kid who just didn't want to say no or is too scared to like kind of back out. And then
yeah,
the next thing you know, you end up freaking catching a case for some mistakes or some miscommunication or whatever. Um, so I kind of do want to talk to some schools and kind of talk to the guys and be like, look, man, just you need to understand how to be a gentleman, right? And just kind of back off. And
yeah,
I wish I would have had that. Like I never had a father. I never had anybody to tell me like, look, you're 16. You don't need to be worrying about banging every girl in
yeah,
high school or whatever, right? Like it's not that big of a deal. So
yeah. Casual sex has become such a normal thing that we have to address. It's like, why is it such it shouldn't be something that's normalized. It shouldn't. And when you're a victim and you experience sexual abuse, it's been normalized.
yeah,
It's something that it became something that was normal to you, and nobody was there. You didn't have a backstop to tell you like, hey, you went through this trauma. Let's put you through a program so you can understand that, like, hey, this isn't a normal thing. These aren't normal interactions you should be having. Like nobody takes that time.
right.
Nobody takes that time and especially now where we're in the age of OnlyFans, we're in the age of
Yeah,
constant
yeah,
sexual like it's I saw a meme where it's like having sex is the first base nowadays. It's like
right,
we shouldn't normalize that. We
right,
shouldn't be promoting that idea. Um, it was something that you went through and you didn't have somebody to help you navigate it.
right.
And luckily, by the grace of God, you made it through that period in life.
Yeah, man, it was, dude, it was tough, man. Like I said, it would probably take me close to 8 to 10 hours to really detail everything that was happening between my mom and this guy and all these different parts of my life. But what I'm trying to do now is I actually have an event next week I'm going to, and speaking to a bunch of kids, and my message now is like, dude, like you still belong. There's a place. It doesn't matter what happened to you. There's a place in this world where you belong, right?
Absolutely.
I felt probably the most welcome when I was in the army because you're just around a bunch of shitbags and you're just freaking bunch of knuckleheads, and you just
And the thing is, like, and I'm, I hold my associate's degree in infantryman warfare. I'm a
yeah,
member of the 82nd. Shout out to the second of the 504. It In this project, I realized that combat arms attracts individuals like us because we know what it's like to not have any power. We know what it's like to be a victim, and we desperately want to be a protector. We desperately want to go somewhere and make a difference. And
yeah, man,
what greater calling than going to combat?
yeah,
And what greater calling than being part of, the greatest profession on earth, combat arms? That's where I found myself. That's where I found myself going. And then going into special operations afterwards, because it's like, okay, like, I got my associate's degree in being a protector. Let's go get a master's degree in this shit. And the
right,
same individual, I found the same type of individuals, and we never talked about it, but you can feel, you can see the same sort of drive. And it's like, fuck, like, now that you reflect back and look, how many of my brothers were suffering with the same trauma, the same pain? And it turns out a lot of us. And it's fucking heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to realize that we are not this anomaly. There are more of us than we know.
yeah,
And some of us are still suffering silently. And
yeah,
if you're out there, it doesn't take anything away from you. It
yep,
does not make you any less of a fucking man. Like, it's not your fault that you went through this. You had
that,
no control over it. Like, you deserve to be free of this. Get help. Be willing to talk to somebody. And when you're able to, when you finally find what works for you in your mental health journey, be willing to advocate for others. Be willing to stand up, because that's what brings awareness to this. That's what brings more light to this. And that's what combats the fucking idiots right now on social media, on TED Talks, on Capitol Hill, championing the cause to make fucking pedophiles a gender ideology. They're not.
yeah,
They're criminals to the highest degree, and they should all be fucking executed. Sorry, I'll put a warning indicator in the podcast description. I'm sorry. The most vulnerable people deserve the most protection, and that's our children.
yeah,
And I'm
man,
sorry, the children don't belong to a community. Children don't belong to a fucking greater part of our society. They belong to fucking parents. Parents hold, unless the parents are predators, then you have all the rights to
yeah,
take care of them however you see fit. In my idea, we should be able to take care of them with a 25-cent 22 round. Again, warning for violence. But I will say this: there is dangerous rhetoric right now, and we all have to be aware and listen to it, because if I see one more video with one more ignorant individual claiming that pedophilia needs to be normalized and accepted, I'm going to lose my shit. It is
dude,
absolutely wrong. There's no room for it in our society, and the individuals who are found guilty of doing this shit need to be held accountable, man, because they don't deserve to be out here living freely. And there's so many people that are championing this idea that it's. I'm losing my mind just just every time I see it, man. It's so wrong, dude.
dude,
And I
yeah.
can't. Yeah.
Yeah, man. I told somebody the other day, I've got a son. I got a 5-year-old daughter and a 3-year-old son, and my son is, he's a beautiful little blue eye, blonde hair boy, right? I mean, if I put him on the internet today, he would sell for $100,000, and they would ship him all around the world, and do to a 3-year-old child, to a little boy who just wants to freaking play with his cars. They would hook him on drugs and do just horrendous
Horrible,
things to
nightmarish
him,
things.
right? And it's happening. I mean, it's happening right now. It's 6:52 in Atlanta. It's happening right now, probably within 10 miles of my house. It's happening all over the world, man. And for people to like freaking just, you know, yeah, it's happening. And
Yeah.
there needs, I don't know, we're never going to stop it, I don't think. But what I want to be able to do is to show people that they still freaking belong, man. Like, I show up to a corporate America kind of job, working in an office with a bunch of people who probably grew up with mom and dad and have everything they want. They've never had a bad day or a flat tire or a spilled coffee in their life. And so they just don't understand how tough life can be. But for the
Yeah.
people who do, I want them to know that you freaking belong, man. And I have won. So I've jumped out of planes. I've served in the 82nd Airborne. I freaking went to Afghanistan. I've been all over the world, Africa, Europe, freaking the Dominican Republic. I got out of the Army. I made a lot of money. I went to Las Vegas. I won a national construction awards. I was the #1 construction manager at a company, right? At one of the biggest construction companies in America. And I say all that not to brag, but to tell people that they freaking belong. And when I was on that freaking stage in Las Vegas, speaking to a room full of millionaires, not a damn person in that room could relate to me. Not a single one of them. I know it. I know it to be true. And there's no way in hell they would believe, or maybe not believe, but understand where I had come from and why that award. It probably doesn't mean much to anybody because nobody knows what that award is. If I told you what it was, you wouldn't know what it is, and that's okay. So that award probably doesn't mean as much to people as it does to me because if I could go back to my 12-year-old self and just tell him to freaking hang on, man, it's going to be okay. Don't kill yourself. Just keep fighting, man. Just keep fighting. One day you will find a place and you will belong and you'll have a beautiful family. You have 2 kids to love and protect. That's my message now is that despite the bullshit, man, like there is a place for you in this world. You just got to hang on and just keep fighting. And it's hard, but that's what you got to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely, brother. That's the fucking truth. I I feel the same fucking way. I look back at that young kid that was struggling to live day by day and thinking of not having any dreams, not having any aspirations, not just thinking like, hey, tomorrow could be the end.
Yep.
Tomorrow could be the end of my fucking life. Like, no dreams, no hopes. And here I am, like, successful. Being able to understand that and realizing that, man, there's so many kids out there. It's going to be okay. Trust in God's plan. Trust in God's plan. I didn't want to believe it, but I look back now and it's like all those years, all that pain, all that trauma, all of that. There was a plan for it. I didn't understand it. I couldn't see it and I couldn't control it, but that's okay because I made it through it. I made it through that and I know that I'm making a difference. I know that people like us being able to give a voice and a face to what it looks like, it changes the fucking game because everybody sees that face of a young girl. Everybody sees the face of maybe a child from a different country.
Yep.
But when the face is a bearded guy that serves in the military, that lets everybody fucking know that it can happen to any single individual and that we all need to be aware of it. We all need to be able to be sensors around our community and understand that children deserve protection. Seth, I can't thank you enough for being here, man, for being vulnerable enough and sharing your story. Dude, I cannot wait for your book. I can't wait to sit down and have more talks because, like, this is how we bring change. This is how we're able to empower others. And there's so many of us out there, and we just need to be able to meet and bring everybody along on this journey of success because for every one of us, there's 5 or 6 who are still in pain and still struggling, and we have to be that beacon of hope, man.
Yeah.
So thank you for what you're doing. Do you have a website or anything we can plug?
I don't have a website yet. The only thing is just right now I'm just working off an Instagram. As things come out, as things progress with the book, I'll have a website built and I'll have things specifically tailored for my book. But my Instagram right now is just it's at Go Beyond the Shadows. Potential title for my book is Strength Beyond the Shadows. So that's kind of where that comes from. And if you follow me on Instagram, you'll see me kind of talk about these things and talk about what I'm doing and trying to save the world, man, one person at a time.
Hell yeah, brother. That's what we're here for. Again, thank you for being here, man. For the listeners out there, I hope that you're able to listen through and forgive me for my violent rhetoric, but that's how I feel. And if you don't like it, don't tune in anymore. But yeah, there's no hope to compromise when it comes to our kids. So thank you so much, Seth, and we'll see you all next time. Take care.